Ray, I'm live.
Setting up my meeting. Apparently, it remembered the key. Let's see. Yep. Okay, we should be live in a moment. Let me mute YouTube. Otherwise, I'll be screwed. Site.
We've already got somebody that wants to come and heckle.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, Bill's welcome to heckle all he wants. I mean, he can show up. And but I put the link literally.
Yeah, no.
On Twitter.
I'll send it to him again since it didn't.
Okay. Although let's see, it's not currently showing that it's live on YouTube. So trying to figure out what's going on there. This is always the fun of doing the technical work. Where is Restream sending this if we're not seeing it on YouTube? Although it's showing up on Facebook. I got at least one person watching it there.
Nice. All over, buddy.
Yeah. So whoever it is that's currently watching on Facebook, since I don't have that currently up. Ah, there we go. Now YouTube claims we started streaming a minute and a half ago.
Nice.
Yep, there we go. Okay, I can now see that. Let's just check with the Facebook stream. This is always the fun everybody gets is to watch us set up at the beginning before we actually mean to go live.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
While they're watching, got anything you want to talk about, or should I whip out the book?
Oh, whip out the book. I love that. We talked about the audio. So I just had my son's bar mitzvah.
Yes.
And that was really epic.
We could talk about that.
Oh, hold on. I need to now turn off audio on Facebook. It's always fun. There we go. Okay. So we had the bar mitzvah. And thank God I have all this equipment. So I was able to use it. So I moved my office down to the basement for a week. We took a standing desk, and we have these table expanders that we use to make our dining room table bigger. It's a sheet of plywood, 5 foot by 3 foot, and then we they're covered in vinyl. And so we put one of those on top of the sit-stand desk, brought it up, and then covered it with our chuppah cover to make it into the altar, the bima for the service.
Neat.
But I actually had this camera set up, and it was literally all the way across the room, just with zoomed in a little bit to just sort of tight shot on the bima, and then we had the fun with the microphones.
Nice.
And now you remember because I sucked you into a piece of that, which is we did the dress rehearsal on I want to say it was Wednesday, and everybody's the cantor said, "There's a crackle in your voice." No, it was right on Monday we did the dress rehearsal. Yeah. He said, whenever your son was singing, I could just hear this crackling underneath what he was doing. And I'm like, oh man, did I just screw something up? And I'd gotten this cheap, long cable to hook the mic up because the computer and the mic were like 20 feet away from each other. So I'm like, oh, this is what I get for buying a cheap XLR cable. So I go to BH Photo and I'm like, great, send me the most expensive cable you've got. Just to be on the safe side. So it shows up. And on Wednesday night, we had our services for our weekly minyan. Mm-hmm. And I'm up there, and I've said, okay, I'll just stand at the beam and I'll do stuff. And my mom's in the services, and she's like, there's this crackle underneath your voice. And that was, I think, when I reached out to you, and I said, and I reached out to you, and I reached out to one other person, and I think you got back to me first, and I said, I need you to help me figure this out. And sure enough, you jumped on with me, and you're like, yeah, it sounds like a wet mic, but it's not wet, but your mic's the problem. And I believed you. You were wrong, just to be clear, but that's okay. Like you're trying to diagnose my problems from across the country. And,
I felt bad though. I mean, I would have never thought. Long story short, for those of you paying attention on the stream, it was a sample rate.
Don't come on! I'm telling the story, and you jumped to the end of my story. Just because I blamed you for making me buy a new mic.
What happens when you blame me? So
I bought it. So I buy a new microphone. I go to BH Photo, and I have them ship me a microphone. And I reached out at the same time to Bosch, who made the old microphone, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we could probably do a return and ship it to you." And I'm like, "I'm not quite positive this will work out well."
Yeah.
So I get my microphone, and Friday night I plug it in, and I think I tried to get you back on to help me test that it would work. You weren't available. But I'm like, oh, I can just like record listen to somebody's on my iPhone. So I'd had the person who taught us how to read Torah had recorded the Torah portion on my iPhone. So I've got it playing under the mic, and I'm sitting across the room listening in through QuickTime, and I'm like, okay, everything sounds good. We're good to go. And we do the Friday night services. And an hour after services, I get mail from the cantor. And he says, I can still hear the crackling.
Oh.
And this is like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? And I'm like, I'm just going to sleep on it. Bad idea. I didn't sleep. Because the next morning we have to do this. Okay. And I get up at like 5 a.m. and I'm like, I'm going to go solve this problem. So the first thing I did is I went and I have a condenser USB mic and a USB extension cable. So I hooked that up and I made sure it would work. And I'm like, great. And I'm just trying to figure it out. And I'm like, great, problem doesn't show up unless I have Zoom in the mix. And I understand diagnostics enough to recognize I have to test everything through Zoom. So I've got my laptop, my wife's laptop in another room. I've got mine. I've got my phone. We're trying to solve this problem. We've got the diagnostic. And so I finally just pull up Google. And I said, okay, I can't swap out my DSP, Universal Audio Aero DSP, and I can't swap out Zoom. I'm guessing those are the two problems. And I Googled it, and popping, and somewhere buried in somebody's forums, there was a comment about the sample frequency on the Aero, and resetting it back to normal. But mine was the default. So I said, well, what if I just move it away? I move it away, the crackle disappeared. Literally, that was the only problem. So it sounds like it's a beat frequency of some kind between Zoom and the DSP.
That's crazy. I still feel bad.
It's okay. Now I have two microphones. I just have to get another adapter. So I'm just getting one of the all-in-one USB to XLR adapters. I'll use that with the other microphone down in the basement where I've got a little mini green screen studio.
You've got two really good mics now. Like amazingly good mics.
Yeah, so my goal is just to be able to pick up the laptop and move down there. And right now I have to pick up like all of this gear.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to just pick up the laptop, plug in down there, and stream from the green screen so that it's only like this 10-minute exercise because I still have to like shut down a bunch of apps and restart them. But so that's the goal.
My cat is trying to attack the cables on my desk.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So let's see. I've got two watching on YouTube, so we've got lurkers.
Yeah, and I've got somebody watching on Facebook.
All right, wow, we have an audience.
On Facebook.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for watching.
And I didn't look at Twitch to see who's watching on Twitch.
Yeah, we've probably got like an entire audience on Twitch.
No, I think I've only got like 2 people who ever watch anything I do on Twitch. One of which is me, and the other is my son.
No, this is funny. So I guess for everybody that's kind of lurking, let's explain what we're doing. This is a pretty regular monthly gathering for you and I, right? Like we do this quite a bit, and we decided to turn it into like a little podcast because we end up having some really interesting conversations just to have them. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to record them, which is what you're hearing now. So like the warm-up conversation about Andy's weekend getting set up for the bar mitzvah, that is very typical of how he and I just kind of start talking. So this video is being recorded. The audio of it will be added to the Technical Outcast podcast, which is why you didn't hear the intro or anything like that. We're just going to go. And now that I'm on camera, I'm going to show the audience something that you can see here. It's the book. The book. The book is what I use to taught Andy. I have tons of talking points and little notes and single word phrases that if you utter them in the right order will send him off. You have a comment. What is your comment?
I don't know. Just I felt like I should put up a comment since you have a book. I just have postcards.
So Andy has postcards to earlier when I was turning my mixer on. I didn't have it configured in Zoom right. And he has these little note cards he can hold up to the camera like, I can't hear you. Yeah, they can't hear you working on it.
Yeah.
It's pretty
But the
fun.
backside of the postcards is the fun part of trolling any football fan.
Trolling the football fans. See, this is speaking of background stuff. Tell me about the violin that's in the case behind you. I saw that on the call the other day.
Yeah. That's not a violin, that's a fiddle. Do you know the difference between a violin and a
No, I
fiddle,
do not.
Steve?
I do not,
Ah,
especially not
there's
at a glance because
there
it
are
looks like a violin.
vast differences between a violin and a fiddle, none of them physical.
Then educate me.
So apparently, and I didn't know this either until somebody corrected me because they said, "What's that violin?" And I said, "It's a fiddle." And they're like, "There isn't any difference between a violin and a fiddle. The only difference is in how you play it. So the musical style apparently determines whether it's called a violin or a fiddle." And there are musicians who specialize in sort of bending that line, and they flip back and forth between music that would make you call it a fiddle and music that would make you call it a violin. This one is autographed by one of the greatest fiddlers of all time,
Mhm.
Mr. Charlie Daniels himself.
Oh, rest in peace, Charlie
So
Daniels.
rest in peace. I actually put this up before he died, so it's not didn't go up as a tribute to him. But it is not my fault that he died. I didn't jinx it. But just in case I did, I'm just going to leave that here for a while rather than put up some other memorabilia. It's you probably know, and a lot of people who see me know, my walls are always changing with the memorabilia that I have on them.
Which is actually kind of entertaining because every time you join a call with you never know what's going to be on in the background.
Yeah.
I've taken an almost obsessive, compulsive type of motive that whenever I'm on a call with you, the first thing I look at is what's in the background. Sometimes I rewind like videos and stuff when you record it just to listen to it because I'm still studying the background. Like
That's
you,
awesome.
you did a like a fireside chat early on first quarter, and like Martin was like, hey, you should watch this, and I was like, sure, I'll watch it, not a problem. I spent like the first 10 minutes of that video just looking at all the books that were in the background to the
Yep.
point where I expanded the video and like blew up the screen a little bit, see if I could read the titles. And I'm just like, I got a problem.
Yep.
Maybe I should actually listen to what he sings, and I had to rewind it back.
Those fireside chats were really fun. It's before I had this nice setup, so I
Yeah.
was just doing it all with a little DJI, the Osmo Pocket. And since we have 5 fireplaces in my house, and one is a fire pit outside, like every week I just went to a different fireplace and I did a fireside chat. And after the second one, I had people commenting. They're like, "You're in a different fireplace." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Did the third one, and they're like, "Now you're really in a different fireplace. What are you doing here?" Like I had people convinced that those were green screen effects.
Well, I actually asked you that the
Yep.
very next time we talked after you did one of those. I was like, "What kind of green screen background are you using?"
Yeah,
You
because
got
it was
like a
high quality.
yeah, you like had a bookcase and a fireplace. Like, what's going on? You're like, no, that's my house. I'm like, really?
Yep. Gas fire is really nice. It means you can sort of pinpoint heat into whatever room you're actually going to be in.
Speaking of the videos and podcasts that we're recording, there's a tie-in here. Shouts out to Hackers with Bourbon, because one of the first videos I saw of you doing the fireplace, you had bourbon sitting on the background, and I was just like, I know those bottles.
Yep. So this is medicinal.
Medicinal. That's perfectly
2 days
fine.
ago, I bit my lip while I was eating, and so while it's healing, it is wicked painful.
Oh,
But I've
that'll help.
discovered the easiest thing because I'm terrified of using the numbing agents for your inside your mouth because I don't want to swallow them and choke. Like
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to, but having been had small children in my house, I got berated enough by the pediatrician.
Dude.
And you know what the pediatrician always said about tooth pain? She said, "Look, the American Pediatric Association won't let me tell you this, but my mother-in-law back in South Carolina would always just use whiskey."
That's what I did when
Yeah.
I was a kid. My mom used to take like when I was teething, her and grandma both used to tell me a story of how they would take a pacifier, dip it in a little bit of whiskey, and rub it on my gums,
Oh
and I
yeah.
would fall right to sleep, but I would no longer have any pain. And the really crazy thing is nowadays, I forget who I was talking to. I think it was my doctor when the kids were little. He was like, "Yeah, that's child abuse. You probably shouldn't do it." I'm like, "Dude, my mother didn't abuse me.
Yeah.
I'll be
No, it's
okay."
like in a tiny amount. Like the real thing you're getting is that numbing effect. My
Yeah.
daughter was actually was very sensitive to the taste of the whiskey, and there were some whiskeys I had to use my finger for it. And there were some that you put it on and she's like, whatever. And others where she would just latch onto that finger and suck for all it was worth. She's like, the Auchentoshan triple wood was one of her favorites. Like,
No.
man, we went through that stuff really fast. So
that's awesome. Yeah, apparently I was a Jack Daniels baby.
Well, I'm sorry. That's not good taste. Let me tell you.
Well, it explains a lot about my obsession with whiskey.
No disrespect to my late brother who swore by Jack Daniels, but the year after he died, we got together. Jack and Coke was his favorite drink. Mm-hmm. So on his yard site, I went and I bought a bottle of Jack Daniels, first one I'd ever bought in my life. And we get a thing of Coke. And we pour ourselves, and they're light pour Jack and Daniels. Like, this isn't even big one. And everybody takes a sip, and we're all like, what is this shit? Like, this is horrible.
Could you?
Ray, how did you drink this your whole life? So
you
this
either
is
love it or you don't.
Yeah, this is the 1792, I think, is the
1792 is very good stuff. Very good stuff.
It's a little more potent than I think I need for the lip, but I'm enjoying it.
So here lately, I've been doing Balvenie Caribbean Cask has been my go-to, and then of course Lagavulin is one of the
classic six. Yeah. That's a very good choice. Diageo will be very happy with you.
Yeah, Diageo loves me because I pretty much buy all their stuff.
Yeah, I used to work for them. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
Here, see, this is what I mean by he and I have random conversations. We started off on a party and some microphone problems. Now we're talking whiskey. Tell me about your time with them. This is
so back. That was before they were Diageo. Back when it was United Distillers, which was right after it was just the Guinness Corporation. You know, they were doing the move. And my parents owned an inn in Vermont. They'd watched the Newhart show and thought this was a brilliant retirement plan. It was not. If they're watching this, they'll agree with that. The amount of work that they went through, and we ended up going out of business. So, but I wanted to stay in Vermont, so I went to work for a hotel locally, the Equinox Hotel in Manchester, Vermont, which had just been bought by United Distillers. Mm-hmm. So they own 2 resort properties in the whole world: Glen Eagles in Scotland and the Equinox. So I was a bartender for Diageo, which is kind of a cool place to be in. And it was right when they were pushing the Classic 6.
Yep.
So we literally had like this featured space on top of the bar, this like wood trophy case with the 6 bottles in it. And I actually still have in one of my files, we had a contest one month. And it was to see how many servings you could sell. And I was pushing that stuff hard. Like, we had one of the guys from the company who'd come over, he'd sit there, and he'd walk over and he'd be like, I want a Guinness. And I'm like, you sure you don't want a Lagavulin before that?
Tell you what.
And I actually sold like 90 shots in a month.
Ooh, wow.
Which was pretty good. But what's funny was that the prize was a bottle of the Royal Lagavulin. But I didn't really drink at the time. And so I didn't take that. And they said, instead you could have dinner for 2 in the Colonnade, the high-end restaurant. So I still have the gift certificate for the dinner for 2 that I won like 20 years ago. I'm pretty sure they'll honor it if I ever bother showing up with it.
Probably. I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't.
It doesn't have an expiration date on it because it was sort of an internal prize thing.
I would imagine they would be interested to see you after all these years and find out what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Like I think, is Rome burning?
I think he was referring to the fiddle when you pointed it out.
Oh,
that's
okay.
What Bill's Bill's commenting on YouTube. I don't think anybody's commenting on Twitter. If they're not tagging us. And I don't have any comments on Facebook.
How are you, buddy? Yeah, it's I just happened to glance over at my other monitor. I'm like, look, there's stuff on YouTube.
That's actually the hardest thing to do when I'm live streaming. It's because I have up all the windows so I can look at the comments. But I have this really bad habit of looking at myself.
Yep.
And so what I have to do is I put Zoom right in front so that like I'm right over the camera. So when I'm looking at me, that's okay. But then I'm like looking over here and I'm looking over here and it's just gets in my way.
My eyes trail all over the place. I'm looking left, I'm looking right, paying attention to my dogs. My cat right now is trying to climb into the window in front of me. Got my boy sitting to my right. I'm just kind of glancing everywhere. And it's funny because I've got Zoom right here, my camera right there. And then I have our stream over here on this monitor. And I'm just kind of bouncing around, bobbing my little head, just looking looking where I can. So when it came to your time as bartending, tell me a bartender story. What's some interesting things that happened to you while you were working?
Well, I've got great stories. So you know that there's this myth that like bartenders are like therapists. Everyone wants to come and talk about their problems to the bartender.
Amen on
I
that.
never ever experienced that. Now maybe it's because
Oh,
I didn't look very interesting, to talk to. Everybody wanted to know my story. Like the number of times that I was asked, "Why are you bartending in Vermont?" Like, what was that? Like 22, 23 at the time? 22, yeah. And so they all wanted to hear my story, and I'm like, I got kicked out of school. My parents' inn went bankrupt. I'm the ski bum who's paying the bills. Like literally, that's my story at this point. Um, I later go back to school. But the most interesting one was, people really just wanted to be paid attention to. Like I carried a lighter just so that when people would pull out a cigarette, I could light it for them. Like your tips were astronomical just for
yeah,
little things
just
like that.
lighting a cigarette. I used to always I would wipe the condensation off the area in front of them as they were sitting there, and
Right.
just set the glass down. Or I would teach. There's a trick, and you'll know this trick. You take a little bit of table salt, you put it on the napkin, set the beer glass on the napkin. It'll never stick. It'll
Right.
always, the napkin will stay there. Teaching people that trick used to impress the hell out of them. I'm like, it's simple science, but
Mm-hmm.
here you go. Um, yeah, little things
Yeah.
I find, but like you, I never had anybody like pour their heart out to me while I was sitting at the
No.
bar.
But my
There
favorite
was a bookie. There was a bookie that used to come into our
bookies.
bar, and he would sit on the end,
Mm-hmm.
and I would watch him make book every week during football. And he he had really funny stories. So he was this old guy,
Yep.
probably late 50s, early 60s. He's from the 70s area of New York when the mob ruled the world and bookmaking was a thing. And so when he moved to the Midwest, he just kind of brought that with him. And what was interesting is just listening to him tell the stories and how he figured out the lines and how he did all this. And he had like an entire system down for this. And I swear this man used to make bank, just bang. But his drink, what he wanted, and he would sit here all day, Andy. I'm talking, he would get there at like 8, 9 in the morning when we'd start to open, and he'd be there until we closed, watching all the games and everything
Yeah.
like this. His drink was tonic water.
Yeah.
That's it. Tonic water, maybe a little bit of lime, but that's all he wanted. He didn't want anything else.
Right. Because he's
He
a
would just sit
professional.
there
He's working.
and people would come up to him all day long and drop dime and just give them whatever odds they want. And it was fantastic. Just unbelievable amounts of education just from watching.
Yep. That's how I learned how to pour tea, actually. We had this lovely old couple of British ladies. And they would just come in and they wanted tea. And they were very precise in how they wanted their tea made. Like,
Nice.
I had to heat the teacup and the teapot before. So like we had the standard urns that would heat water, and that wasn't hot enough.
Nope.
So what I would actually do is you would fill the tea kettle with that, right? It's a little ceramic with one of those just to heat it up.
Yep.
And I'd have one of the cooks boiling water for me. And then as soon as it was done, pour out the tea kettle and then pour in the boiling water. And then they were happy. And I did the same thing, heat up every dish that came out to them. And look, they never tipped me much. It was like $1.50 for tea, so it came out to like 3 and change. And some days I got like literally $3.50. I'm making like 38 cents on it. But it didn't cost me anything. They never came in when it was busy.
Yeah.
And it was just like I just learned this. Now I've got the flip side. I've got the ones that my best bartender story. The New York State Bar Association used to have its annual retreat, or maybe it still does, up in southern Vermont. And so we had this weekend where we were just packed, everybody was, with lawyers who were trying to spend money to impress each other. Like you're trying to recruit people, you recruit them by showing that you have an expense account. And they're like, oh, you're profitable. I want to come work with you.
Money.
And there were these 3 lawyers who they were in the bar every night and they were spending a ton of money. And I think on Saturday night, and I was working solo, which was unusual. Usually it's a 2-person bar. The other bartender had called in sick. And I was like, when they said to me, they said, hey, can you work it solo? I'm like, this is the Bar Association weekend. I will absolutely work solo so I don't have to split tips. So I'm not splitting my tips. And these three are sitting there early on before dinner, and they're drinking up a storm. And it's the expensive stuff. Like it is the Royal Lagavulin has come down, and the Johnny Walker Blue Label has come down, and they're buying drinks for other people. It's like a $250 tab before dinner.
Wow.
Now they get called for their table, and they're good folks. They'll clear with me. I always hated when people had a big tab, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, can we just move the check into the dining room?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just got screwed on that because my whole tip is now going to a server."
Yeah.
And so I deliver the bill to them, and they're having this animated conversation. They call me over, and they said, "Look, here's the deal. We had made an arrangement about who paid for what bill throughout the whole weekend, so that everybody gets to pay the same number of bills. And we didn't think about this as a separate bill. So we need you to decide which of us will pay this bill." Right? And I'm looking at them, and I'm like, cocky, 22-year-old, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I said, well, I wouldn't want it to be unfair for two of you not to get to pay the bill. So why don't you all just pay the bill? And they're looking at me, and I'm like, oh, I just went right over the line with this one. And they said, hold on a second, come right back. And so I walk away, I'm like cleaning dishes, and I'm like, am I getting in trouble, or is this going to turn out well? And so I come back, and they pull out 3 credit cards, and they say, put the whole check on each of our cards.
Yeah.
So $500 gratuity for being audacious.
Yeah. The best bartender / server story I have, Indianapolis, the first year we ever had the Formula One Grand Prix here, I got to wait on Team Ferrari. They were staying in our hotel.
Nice.
And so, I didn't know anything about it. My dad, huge F1 fan, and he calls me and he's like, "Hey, Steven, is it true that Ferrari's in your hotel?" And I'm like, well, I mean, you were out at the track, Dad. So you tell me. You would probably know because my dad works for IMS, and so he's out there, and I guess they were talking about the hotel, and he's like, my son works there. So he called me and he's like, is that true? And I'm like, there's a ton of Ferrari logos all over the place and everything like this, but I don't think I honestly couldn't tell you, Dad, because I don't know this stuff. And he's like, huh. Well, if you end up meeting Michael Schumacher, you let me know. And I'm like, sure, not knowing who this was, not knowing anything. So later that night, me and my friend, and we were going to double team a party of 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we walk into the banquet room when they were set up, and it was so funny because it's all just people hang out. There's Ferrari banners, and then there's this giant damn trophy at the end of the table. And this really happy German guy just hanging out, just talking to everyone. And he comes up and he's like, hey, good to see you guys. Can we get a couple more rounds of drinks? And I'm like, sure. What do you guys want? And so we just handled them like any other table. We didn't, not until the end did we realize who it was. And it was really comical because I called my dad and I'm like, hey, Dad, I got somebody wants to say hi to you. And he's like, sure. And I give Michael the phone, and he's like, I hear you're a fan. How are you, Mr. Powell? My dad lost it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But it was cool because I remember we got, because it was such a large party, it was auto gratuity all the way across the board. That's just added in. And then we got the banquet fee on top of that. And the manager, the crew guy, the boss of all of them that were there, he was like, look, I'm just going to go ahead and give you boys these envelopes, and I want to thank you. We've had a great time in your hotel, and every time we come to the restaurant, we're like, oh, well, we appreciate it. Walked away later, there was $600 in that envelope.
Nice.
I was like, oh my God, what? Yeah, it was cool. It paid my rent for 2 months, just that one table. So I was quite happy being, normally broke Steve didn't have that kind of money. So that was a good thing. But yeah, I mean, it's so weird because when you wait tables, you get the best of humanity and the worst of humanity, and you never know what you're going to get. But the longer you do it, you end up being able to read people really well. You can tell by how they're sitting, how they're talking. You can tell by what they're ordering. You can tell by how they're ordering. You can get a sense of, is this going to be a good table or a bad table, or a good cover or a bad cover if you're at the bar. And it was really, really funny to me because a lot of that stuff really helped me as a journalist years later. You learn to kind of read the room, I guess would be a good way to put
Yeah,
it.
it's a good way to look at it. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's sort of obvious once you say it.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's
the
stuff like
skills
that.
I learned as a bartender, they were really helpful getting me over. Look, I was a jerk of a teenager, and when your salary depends on you being nice to human beings, you learn how to be nice to human
It's
beings.
a humbling
It
experience,
really is.
believe you me.
But yeah, the skills to recognize, like somebody asks you to tell them a story, and you have to be able to read the moment they disengage.
Yeah,
And they're like, "Oh, I'm not interested in your story anymore," but they'll never tell you. But you
no.
see the eyes glaze, and you're like,
Mhm,
"Oh, I use that in public speaking all the time."
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think another thing that kind of helps, um, you learn the value of little things. That
yep,
little things have this massive aggregate effect. So, like we were talking about earlier, lighting someone's cigarette for them. And I know it seems strange for us to talk like this because smoking's banned everywhere now. But I promise you, all you kids listening out there, there was a time when you could smoke pretty much everywhere. And you
yeah.
go to a bar or a restaurant, and they had smoking and non-smoking sections. And that's funny to me. That was always funny to me. We had the non-smoking section that was up in the front of the restaurant. The rest of the restaurant was smoking. Like there was nothing really like separating them. There
Right.
was
No,
no air
it was a little
filtration.
bit.
Like, yeah.
And in fact, the bar when I was at the Equinox, I was in the Marsh Tavern, and like right over the bar, they had a header beam designed so that smoking would sort of rise and stay on the outside of the header beam, so it didn't like roll right into us. But the
That's neat.
kitchen was at negative air pressure to where we were, and I had a door to the kitchen.
So every time it
And
would
so
open, it would just
every time a
suck them
server opened
like
that,
right
because we were
into
making
you.
drinks for the restaurant, and they'd come through the kitchen to get them. And so every time they'd open it, like all the smoke would get sucked right into my face. And I'm like, I want an alarm, like push the button so I can duck and stop breathing when you open that door.
I can remember there was a lady one time who asked me, she's like, how exactly are the non-smokers supposed to avoid the smoke in here? I'm like, hey, look, you tell me. You figure this
Yeah.
out. I'd like to
Well,
know. We could probably make
I
some
think
money
that
on
the
this.
answer is that by creating a non-smoking section, you started to allow people a preference cascade.
Yeah.
And preference cascades are really fascinating. For those not familiar with them, it's this idea that, especially in a dictatorship, in a totalitarian regime, where there might be a group of people who don't know each other and have no way to communicate, don't support the regime, right? And so think about, you have secret police is often where we talk about it. Is, nobody knows that 90% of the population wants liberty because the 10% completely suppresses them. And a preference cascade is just what happens when one person says, "Hey, I care," and everybody else is like, "Oh, I'm allowed to say I care." And that's
I
basically what a
care.
non-smoking section did, is let you say, "I care," and all of a sudden restaurants are like, only a third of our tables want to be smokers. Okay, let's shrink that section down and down and down until it's like you can't smoke in the lobby. You got to wait till you get to this back room, and then
Yep.
at some point they're like, "Screw this!" And some states mandated it, others
Yeah.
did it a little more graceful. Graciously. Some were quick, some weren't.
I think there's only one or two spots in all of Marion County, which for everyone not familiar, Marion County is mostly Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's only two restaurants where you can actually smoke now in Marion County, and they're both private clubs. So like it's there's like this weird exemption rule going on. And of the two, one of them is actually a cigar bar. Like the entire purpose is to
Yep.
be in there for whiskey and cigars. So yeah, you're right. It didn't kind of shrink out. I can remember, and I don't know if that was the case up where you were, but I remember when they started banning smoking, like smokers and restaurant owners and restaurant workers, they were like, you're going to cost us all this money. Nobody's going to come in now. All of our customers are
Yep.
smokers. And it was like this big rush and this big panic, but it turns out that wasn't the case at all. In fact, restaurant business really didn't change for the most part. Like I was still part-time, but I was still bartending. And
Yep.
when all the smoking bans went into effect, my business didn't change at all. In
So
fact, a
I
lot of my
noticed
regulars
one
still
thing
came
that I
back.
noticed, because the bands, like, it wasn't banned while I was bartending, but I had noticed that the people who smoked tended to not buy the high top shelf liquor items.
Yeah.
I certainly noticed that
They
smokers
spent all their damn
might
money on
drink more,
cigarettes.
but they didn't drink the better stuff. So,
Yeah. They spent all their money on cigarettes, man. I remember
well,
when I
that,
was
and you're
still,
not going to taste the difference.
yeah, true.
It was
When
one,
I
like,
was,
I had a friend that when I was in the Air Force, we would go play trivia. We had to drive like 50 miles to play trivia on Wednesdays to find a bar that did it. We were in South Carolina. We were in a dry county. So we had to go to Columbia. And his joke on anything, like if he had to spend $5, he was like, it's just the 21st Guinness. It's not like I'm going to notice I don't get to drink that one. So, hey, while we're wandering topics, and since you brought up Indianapolis, and which always makes me think about football, since the combine is there, I'm going to hold up the Boston Renegades. Do you know about the Renegades?
I've seen their name mentioned in the local news here, but I don't know like what they are.
The Renegades are the two-time defending champions, but now entering their third consecutive off-season as defending champions of the Women's Football League. They're a local Boston team, fantastic team, very excited about them. So it was funny because I was planning on going to the games this season. I was all prepped to do that, and then COVID happened, and there was no season.
I can imagine there was so many, like, this would have been the year to do a lot of stuff for a lot of people, and then just the rug got literally ripped out from underneath you.
Yeah, so next year, I'm committing. I'm going to be buying season tickets. Don't know that I'll go to every game, but I'm happy to support them. It's one of the pay-for-play leagues. There's not enough revenue yet for the players to not have to pay, like let alone be paid. Like they have to pay to be able to play and operate. So
we had there were a couple times I went to a few Fever games here in Indianapolis. Those were fun games. Like it's a really good crowd. But I think also when you're in your local environment, your local team, no matter what the sport is, the ambiance, maybe like I don't know how to describe it. Like everybody's just always going to be chill because you're around fans who are there to just enjoy and have fun, and so they're not looking for static or drama. And it's really comical. You say you hear Indianapolis, you think football, and even though we tease each other mercilessly and troll each other to no end, I have never once not been at a bar when the Patriots would come in and play the Colts, to where fans of both teams weren't just sitting around and having the time of their lives. Like it's always this it's like best friends, really, because like they would troll each other mercilessly and then buy each other dinner. Like it's just it's never like a horrible fight thing. It's not like,
I think there's a couple rivalries that doesn't happen in, but it's nothing like what I hear you see in Europe with soccer fans.
It's football fans. Football.
No, soccer. Do you know the origin of the word soccer?
Yeah, I did. Damn it! Why do you always get me on these little things? You put me on the spot for stuff, and then I forget it. No, tell me.
Soccer is the abbreviation for association football.
Association football.
Yeah, so football divides into association football, what we think of as soccer. They wrote down those rules. There's rugger football, which becomes rugby, and there's American football. And cleverly, by calling it American football, we just get to abbreviate to a football.
So here's the funny thing. Apparently, I didn't know it at all then, because that's not what I recall.
Yeah, no, people come up with weird and wacky things, but just association football. Like there was an association that codified rules, and if you were playing by those rules for kicking the ball around, that's what you played with.
There was a good friend of mine, and years ago, he got me into rugby. Mm-hmm. And I never understood like the sports all that much, but watching those games, those are the most physically intensive things I've ever seen. It was just amazing.
And if I'd known we were going to talk about rugby, I'd have grabbed my Free Jacks jersey, which is the New England rugby team.
Nice.
Because 2 Patriots players invested in them. So.
Hey, Bill, you having fun trying to keep up with us here, buddy?
Yeah.
You look at Chad. He's like, you went from bartending to smoking to psychology to totalitarians.
And now we're back on rugby.
Now we're back on rugby.
What did you have in the book that we were going to talk about? Because usually we just need a prompt. This was fun while you're pulling it out. I did story time with the interns, and I'm like, just give me a prompt. What do you want to have me talk about? And they were good. They asked me stuff, but you could sort of see that some of them were like, what are you talking about? And like the first prompt, I'm like, here's a 15-minute riff on that question.
So funny thing is, in the book, we had humans as defense is the prompt. But I'm going to add to the prompt by saying yesterday, Twitter had an interesting day. I really feel for their IR team.
Interesting, yeah.
That could not have been pleasant. But considering what happened on Twitter and the prompt of humans as defense, is it really fair to lean on humans for defense, or do you think we need to be shifting away from that and protecting humans from themselves when it comes to security?
Yeah, so let me go with yes and no. It's a great question because it all comes down to how you're going to define the terms. And there's this mindset that really does bother me when people are designing process and control systems, where they say, "Look, we're going to rely on the humans." I'm like, no. Like, what you want to be able to do is have humans whose job is to notice when something weird is happening. But if you're relying on the humans not to do something wrong, then you're going to fail. And I think that's a case of what happened here, right? You have humans, and look, every single company on the planet who has a end user administration problem has the same challenge Twitter has. Just to be clear, designing two-person controls is really hard. I've tried. I've done it. It's painful. It's obnoxious, and there are so many ways around them. It's not even funny. So, but that's the work you have to do. There's a quote that Nancy Leveson uses on a regular basis. For those not familiar with Nancy Leveson, she's a professor at MIT, focuses on safety engineering. And almost every time I hear her speak, at some point she says, "Human error is a symptom of a system in need of redesign." And for me, that's sort of a really good touch
That's
point.
kind of deep,
right? If your root cause was a human who failed, then you had a badly designed system. Now, it's fine to have humans as sensors. That look, they're doing their job, and their job isn't tedious and mundane, and so they might notice something weird, right? And that's okay. Like that's what humans are good at defense, when noticing things that are weird and unusual. But what we often do is we train humans to just say yes, 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 yes all the time. And that's where they fail accidentally. In this case, it seems like from all the reports, there was an actual malicious failure here.
Yeah, and sidestepping the whole Twitter thing, let's say it wasn't a malicious. Let's say the criminals who have been talking to reporters have been trolling them and stringing them along this entire time. Let's say it was an accident. Your point's still valid, even if it was malicious, because it's still a failure of a human, which tells you that there's a problem in the system overall. And that's universal. Like I agree with you on that point. It is universal. I think.
Well, let's take there's that system. So let's assume it was completely accidental. Somebody socially engineered them, a la the Syrian Electronic Army. Like if anybody recalls, there was a while, maybe like 5-6 years ago, where the SEA was doing domain hijacking by socially engineering the registrars, and they'd get you to sort of change who something was owned by. And why did it work? It worked because you had people whose job was to execute on that change request. And so when this change request comes in, social engineering isn't hard. They're already primed to do this task. Like anybody who's ever watched Rachel Toback do her stuff, because she does, I sometimes call it stunt social engineering, and I don't mean that as an insult. Like she will literally do it on YouTube or TV, and you're like, holy cow. But what's the core of it?
I think Rachel was the one that had the crying baby playing on the laptop to build the ambiance in the room, and she's starting to freak out because she's got to get the phone number changed for her boss or get something confirmed for her boss. And you could hear the support agent on the other side literally start emphasizing. And that's the thing. People need to remember when you're targeting, when you're doing social based attacks and you're targeting support people, they are trained to assist you no matter what, to make your problem right and to make your problem go away. So a few years ago, I did a story with a well-known register, and the hacker in that particular instance, what he did was he created a fake ID, faxed him, and said, "I need you to change this guy's domains. Here's the proof that I'm the ownership." And in less than 24 hours, he had complete control over every domain I own. And we did it for a story. Like this was just a demo. But the point being, the support people, the premise was everybody's like, why didn't you blame the company? Why would I blame the support people for doing exactly what they're paid to do? Yeah, like that's it's a process problem. It's not a people problem. that
Yeah,
point.
there's a reason now that Akamai is its own registrar for DNS, and just for our own domains, it's like you can't socially engineer us because we don't have a support organization
Oh,
to move domains because we don't move domains. Like
no.
literally, we have a process. We got a handful of customer domains in there, and the process to move a domain requires me
Yeah.
and two other paranoid people to approve it because we're like, this should never happen. I think it's happened once. One customer once moved a domain out of there.
So this plays along to another stat that's actually always been fascinating to me. When you talk about socially based targets and attacks, it's always help desk and IT. And it's really comical because everybody's always like, oh, you're in IT. How could you fall for this? And blah, 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 blah. And it
your
annoys
job
me
too.
because, again, IT is a service industry.
Yeah.
Everybody in the business is IT's customer. Like literally, I'm here to support you. I'm here to make your day better. I'm here to keep the business moving. And security is no different. That's exactly what we're here for. So yeah, I could easily see a help desk being targeted and easily taken over by a dedicated attacker because I'm supposed to answer questions. I'm supposed to change that password. I'm supposed to make your email work. You know, if you were to call me and you're out and hey, Steve, I'm in the desert and I need to get my phone working and I've got to check email before this meeting. I need your help. I'm going to help you. Now, we have processes, we have policy, we have things we have to do before aid is rendered, but I'm going to help you.
Right.
And depending on the urgency of the situation or, you know, certain values, which is where social engineering comes into play, some of these policies and procedures might be skipped. And again, that's a people problem, but a process problem.
Right.
First.
It's really the process problem. Yeah. And what I like to teach people who say, like, well, what should I do? As I say, look, hold two thoughts in your mind. When somebody's asking you to do something, if you can simultaneously believe that they're an adversary and a person you need to help. Right, so let's say somebody calls me up and says, Scott, I need to get in touch with Steve. Can you give me his cell phone number? I'm going to be like, well, can I have the number he can call you back on? And I'll reach out to Steve.
Yeah.
Because now if you really needed to be helped, great, I helped you. I got to Steve. Steve will call you back. If you didn't, well, I got an opportunity to stop it because I'm going to reach out to Steve and say, look, I'm not sure if this was legitimate, but this person claims you know, that they need to chat with you. And what I found is that most adversaries give up. Like the moment you say that like they hang up and they're done. I suspect Rachel would have some clever attack around me at that
dedicated
point,
ones will always have a follow-up answer or some reason to keep the thing going. It's actually a very common sales tactic, believe it or not. It's getting past no or getting acknowledgement of no and then still turning that into a yes.
Oh, I had that the other day. Oh my God. Because my cell phone number is now in like all of the databases. So I just get calls from sales reps on my personal cell phone. And those conversations are never going to go well. If you're a sales rep and you call my cell phone, the best thing you can do is hang up the moment I tell you that. Because I had one who kept trying to pivot. Well, as long as I have you. And I'm like, no, you can't. And I finally had to say, the next time you open your mouth, my next phone call is to your chief marketing officer about the brand damage you're causing. Because I now know that your company won't lay off my personal cell phone.
Yeah, see, that's where a lot of companies run into problems. There is a security vendor we won't name, but they're well known for having heavy-handed salespeople, and they caught a lot of flack for that.
But you remember they shipped vodka to Jack Daniel to apologize.
That was a hell of an apology, and I'm a little upset because I kind of wanted an apology too, even if I'm a vodka drinker.
Although I'll be really honest, if you're a vendor, like I'm going to apologize to Andy by sending him stuff, please don't. Like, because it used to be because stuff would just show up unsolicited at my office all the time. And I would just peel, like if you put your label on it, I peel it off and I go give it to somebody on my staff. If your label, I can't get off it, it goes in the trash. So there's almost nothing, I have almost nothing that is given to me by anybody other than folks I actually have a direct financial relationship with. Like it's Akamai, it's some wild venture stuff, but try to look around.
It's on his Twitter feed or his blog, one of the two. But if you ever get a chance, look at Andy's letter that goes out to sales pitches and things like this. It's kind of a universal letter now. I think most of us in InfoSec have it and use it. I know I've edited a version of it and sent it out to people before, but it helps to a degree, but unfortunately you'll get the ones that want to just try to pivot and say, well, now that I know you're reading, maybe there's another opportunity, and they just kind of want to circle through.
Yep.
So they didn't read the letter entirely. But yeah, the interesting thing, and this goes back to what we were
If you
talking about.
just, and for anybody who's looking for it, if you just Google CSO Andy and vendor, it's the
Yeah.
first hit.
So if going back to what we were talking about, like a lot of these service industries, it's a policy and a process thing. It's not really a people thing because we've trained them.
Yep.
And this also goes back to when you're looking at individual users and attacks on users themselves. How many times have you seen a certificate warning pop up on a website and you've just clicked OK to close it because it's annoying to see? I would argue that a lot of people listening to this, particularly those that are not hardened into the security echo chamber, have all done it. Everybody
Actually, I'm going to go one step further, Steve. I have done it. I will
yeah,
admit and
I have.
confess that I have done it. And
I
if
did
you're
it
in the
this morning.
security space and you use examples like this that you yourself haven't done, stop. Like, I guarantee almost everybody here has reused a password.
Actually, I'll give you a better one. I was helping my adopted boy Charlie do his taxes, and
Yep.
I had to go to AKO to pull up his guard W-2.
Yep.
And so when I went
AKO
to
is Army Knowledge Online for those
yeah,
who are listening.
and so when I went to pull that up for him, there were certificate errors, which is mildly amusing to me, but I immediately clicked and got past them. Now, Charlie has a smart card, so you plug his military ID into the reader and it authenticates him. So I wasn't particularly worried about it. But again, here is my browser telling me there's something wrong with the security of this website. And I said, yeah, sure, whatever, clicked right past it and did what I wanted to do. Just this morning, I visited a website that immediately threw up certificate errors. And I said, yes, whatever, clicked off of it, said okay, because what I wanted was right in front of me. I didn't care about the error.
Yep.
Now,
of course, I might be the person, I actually do now read all the errors. Chrome has done a great job of making me do so. But mostly I read them because I'm like, please let it not be an Akamai mistake. Because if it is, I've got to go. Like, that's why I read the errors, because it's my incident warning. I'm like, oh, please tell me that my network isn't broken.
No, I've just, I mean, if it's a certificate error and it's a shopping cart, then I'm going to read it and pay attention to it.
Yep.
But if it's just like a regular website and all I want to do is read somebody's blog post, I don't care about cert errors. I'm just not, that is not worth my time and energy. And again, I'm happy to admit that because I have a different risk tolerance than most people do.
Yeah. And here's where I just want to plug Let's Encrypt, where you just like fire and forget. And especially Let's Encrypt on our platform, where I'm like, I had to go through a pain in the ass to set up the certificate the first time, but I haven't touched it since. It just auto rotates every quarter.
The best part is most web hosting companies that you would host a website on, they work with Let's Encrypt. You can do it from your control panel with a click and a click and a click, and it auto updates for you. So like I think it's like 90 days or something like that, you get your refresh certificate. It's just done for you in the background. It's managed. So there is no excuse to not have, valid HTTPS running on all the domains.
No.
But it's a thing. I'm just happy to see it so widely adopted now. I mean, that's a really big thing for me. I think if we look back 10 years, it's almost apples and oranges now.
Oh yeah, I remember doing the math on it because for us it was people going, when are you going to encrypt everything on your platform? And I was like, that's never going to happen. There's no customer demand for it. And now it's basically almost everything is encrypted.
Yeah. It's the first thing they want to know about.
Yep.
It's really interesting. Well, Andy, buddy, we are rapidly approaching the 2:00 hour. So my question is for you is, got any final thoughts on using humans for defense?
So I think humans are a part of any defensive system. If you're relying on them, you're going to have a problem. It's not because humans are bad, but just humans are fallible and they're going to make mistakes. So you want humans to maybe provide oversight, to provide unpredictability. Like that's what adversaries hate. They hate unpredictability, and humans are great at providing that. So you look at it and say, look, you could walk through a bank lobby just fine to get into the building. Like there's 8 ways through it, but there's a human guard there that you have to know you can get past. And as the system is built to like, oh, the guard isn't doing anything except listening for the beeps, yeah, maybe that's a good plan. But if the guard's got to check every person's badge, oh, I can totally defeat that guard.
Yep, that works. Well, all right, everyone. This has been a lot of fun. I like the idea of streaming. This we should do this more often.
We should do this, and next time we'll advertise in advance rather than just doing it impromptu and having like, I think Bill's watching us on YouTube, and I got one friend who's been watching on Facebook whose comment was he was listening to us like it was the radio, which I will totally take as high praise. I'll
take that compliment every day. Thank you for listening to us like we're on the radio. Yep. And it's funny because quite literally it was 12:45 and Andy DM'd me and he's like, "Hey, do you want to stream this?" I'm like, "I got a camera, sure, why not? Let's do it." So yeah, we'll plan better for this next month. But either way, thanks for joining us, and we'll see everybody soon and talk to you soon.
Yeah, see y'all later. I'm gonna kill the live stream now.